Hello and welcome to Voice of Her Own. This is Living and Learning every Wednesday at 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. I hop on and talk about living and learning. My name is Allison, and for the month of November, we are talking about wanting to be liked. This was a topic that my dear friend Libby raised, and it was one that we talked about last week, this wanting to be liked, this primal need to be liked. And so if you haven't seen that video, I suggest you pop over later on to watch it. And today, for this video, we're going to continue talking about wanting to be liked, but we're going to talk about it in the context of perhaps someone has made it clear, or somebody has terminated, maybe they haven't made it clear, but they've terminated a relationship with you or have expressed that they do not like you. So I want to talk about a little bit about what we can do to bounce back from that. And hello, Allie, welcome every week. I love seeing you on here. Thank you. Thanks for jumping on. So what do we do? Because when somebody has either expressed to us that they don't like us or that they no longer want to be in a relationship with us, it can be incredibly painful. And we talked about this last time, that we are hardwired for connection. We are hardwired to be liked because that is how we have safety, emotional safety, social safety. It's just in our DNA. And so when we have this wanting to be liked and someone has expressed that they don't like you, then there's a lot of pain that can come up. There can be anger, there can be sadness, there can be shame, where we want to hide, where we just want to disappear from the world. We can be really angry and blaming at that other person. We can feel sadness and grief. We can feel all of those feelings. We can feel fear that no one's going to want to be with us anymore, ever again. So there's all these emotions that can stir up when we are rejected by somebody else. Even if it's not exactly the most healthy relationship to begin with, we can still experience a lot of painful emotions when a relationship is terminated or when we are feeling or experiencing rejection. So when I think about this, the first thing that really comes to mind is Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Buddhist monk, and he talks about when you are in your suffering, that being in the suffering is enough. We don't need to compound our suffering or add to it with worry. That part of our work becomes being with the suffering of what is. And that when we tell ourselves a story, it's all this other person's fault, or it's all my fault, or nobody's ever going to love me, or how am I ever going, Allie, thank you so much for this. When you're terminated from someone, like the sadness and the grief, it's like nobody's going to hire me again. And we can be in all of these stories. We can tell ourselves a lot of stories about what that rejection means. But the real work is being with the suffering that is. To just be in the fear, to be in the anger, to be in the sadness, to be in the shame, without adding a disempowering story or worry on top of it. And so that's something that I try to remember in life when painful experiences come. I don't know about y'all, but I am a big catastrophizer. I take one thing of bad news and I have a tendency to I'm going to catastrophize the heck out of it. And I will make it into some big thing that it's actually not, or at least it's not yet. But in my mind, I have catastrophized it and made it into something huge. And what I've trained myself out of that automatic pattern by reminding myself to just be with the suffering that is. And so part of the catastrophizing happens because we're going into a story about what that shame or that anger or that sadness or that fear actually means, instead of just being with those uncomfortable emotions. So that's the one thing. Be with the suffering that is, and don't add to the suffering. When we tell ourselves those catastrophizing stories, we kind of think I used to think that I was preparing for the worst and hoping for the best, but all I was doing really was adding onto my suffering and not being in the moment with the pain that was already there. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we can be really sensitive about the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So when we are in those emotions and in those pain, not only do we have to be mindful of the stories that we're telling ourselves around, what it means, but also around what it means about us. Because we might have some accountability in this. I know I still have shame about an insensitive comment that I made one time, and I never saw this person again, even after we got along really great. But it was like my one stupid comment, I think, just ended it. Or at least the shame that I have about that stupid comment certainly ended it, because I never reached out back. And so I think we can hold ourselves accountable when we have something to take in that relationship. Perhaps we were rejected because we said something or did something that was out of our integrity, that was out of that alignment. And so we have to sit with that. And we don't have to sit with that in a punishing way, in a, you're a terrible person way. I used to think that when I beat myself up, that's how I got better as a human being. But that actually wasn't really the case. All that does is keeps me in an abusive relationship with myself. We as humans actually thrive better when we have compassion. We are mammals. We do not thrive under fear and abuse. We actually thrive in nurturing and caring. And so how do we then be caring while also holding ourselves accountable? Because being caring doesn't mean you absolve yourself and you go, oh, I don't have to be accountable to anything, you just toss it away. But it rather means that we can hold ourselves with compassion and be like, yeah, that was a mistake. Probably shouldn't have said that. Well, and better now. So what are you going to do? How can we do better now? Now that we know better, how do we do better? And how do we hold ourselves with compassion to say we all make mistakes? This is something that we all do. And it was difficult and painful. And you still don't lose your worthiness as a human being because you made that mistake. We can still hold ourselves with compassion and grace and say, oh, that was a lot of pain. That's a lot of shame. And I'm still worthy as a human being. That's the trick, to hold both that compassion and accountability. The final thing that I will say, and I say this coming to you originally as a completely spiritual skeptic. I found myself being really allergic to organized religion. And so when this final thing that I have helped me build resiliency is really about deepening your spiritual practice. And by that, I don't mean organized religion necessarily. But whatever that is, that God of your understanding, that higher, that thing that interconnects, that connects us all in this divine way, that falling into that spirituality and knowing that I belong in all things in this world, that I am not a mistake, that I'm here for a reason, and to be connected to that power, that energy that is bigger than me. And to remember that support is there and that I am there within this whole realm, that I'm not worthless, is an important, I have found to be incredibly important when I have felt at my lowest. Because there's something about, we as humans have a primal need to belong. but sometimes it looks like fitting in. So sometimes we'll cling to relationships that are no longer good for us because we're trying to fit in. And it's just not the same as genuine belonging. And so something that I do to help me tap into my spirituality, to tap into that energy that's bigger than me, that holds me, that just knows that I'm not a mistake and that I belong here, even if somebody doesn't like me, is I will literally put my hand on my heart and take a breath into that and just say to myself, I belong, I belong, I belong. And it's amazing when we can kind of lean into that, or when we can call up for prayer and say, I need help. Help me feel this. Help me feel that just because this one person rejected me, that doesn't mean I'm a reject. Help me. And to lean into that faith is incredibly powerful. It helps us tap into stories that are probably more true than the stories we tell ourselves that we're not good enough or that I suck as a human being. But to find something that's even more true, which is more than likely the story of I have value, I have worthiness, and I am a human being, and I make mistakes sometimes, and I will learn from it and grow from it, and I will do my best every moment I can, right? Like that I think is even more true than I'm a loser. So when we experience that rejection, we have to feel our feelings, be with the suffering that is. We have to hold ourselves with compassion and accountability, and to step into our spirituality, to step into that bigger support network that we have and the belonging that comes with that territory, regardless of your religious affiliation. But tapping into that bigger energy is important work. I went from being a spiritual skeptic to a spiritual believer because my life gets better the more spiritual I become. So thank you so much for being here, Allie. Thank you for all your comments, and yes, learning more to ride the emotions. That is the work. I will be launching Boundaries for the Holidays again between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So if you are called to do that work, I will include more links as time goes on, and possibly in this video, maybe after I pick up the kids from the bus stop. But I will be continuing with that program because this work around building resiliency and in not going into story and being with, our biggest fear is often about wanting to be liked by our family members, and what happens when those tensions can arise. So all of that gets covered in Boundaries for the Holidays. So if you're interested in that, I will send more information to you. I wish you a wonderful week of living and learning, and I will see you again next week. Take care. Bye-bye.